What's up, YouTube? What's up, family? Guys, welcome back to another reaction video. And on today's agenda, we're going to be diving into why Poland is preparing for war to prevent it. Now, guys, if I was the one who created that video, the name why Poland is preparing for war to prevent it, I wouldn't have said that. I will say Poland's defense strategy. You know, this is what I'm going to say. All right, so we are going to see why Poland is preparing for war to prevent it. So, guys, I'm excited to see how that goes. So, before we go to the video, I would like you to take some time, to like, subscribe, share with your friends and your families, and make sure you hit that notification bell. All right, so without any further ado, let's dive right in.
Welcome back, Spare Parts Army. Poland is now preparing for war in the hopes of deterring it from ever happening in the first place.
Poland is sending more troops to its border with Belarus after claiming two Belarusian military helicopters violated its airspace.
Most importantly, I think that if Russia is stopped in Ukraine, it won't attack again.
They intend to double their land forces to a staggering 300,000 personnel over the next 5 years, seeking to stop people once and for all from claiming they accidentally invaded Poland. To put this into context, once it's completed, Poland's military will be larger than the French and German forces combined, which makes a lot of sense because a lot is at stake for them. Polish Prime Minister Tusk said, quote, "We are living in the most critical moment since the end of World War II. The next 2 years will decide everything." Poland aims to achieve this gigantic goal by raising their defense spending to 4% of GDP, or about $133 billion over the next 5 years. It's the highest percentage in the entire NATO alliance. It's like they're throwing out their old military and replacing it with a brand new one.
But what challenges will Poland's defense modernization efforts face along the way?
What type of unique weapon systems will they need to invest in? And which strategies will they deploy on the tactical level? I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Hit the like and subscribe button and let's find out. Not my circus, not my monkeys. It's a popular Polish saying that means it's none of my business and I'm not responsible for this volatile situation. However, when your nation is located at the crossroads between Eastern and Western Europe, when it comes to geopolitics, Poland rarely has the luxury of it not being their monkeys. Today, Russian forces in Ukraine are battling on a front line that's only 800 kilometers away from Poland's border. You wouldn't even need to take turns driving there. It's like the same distance from New York City to North Carolina.
Poland.
This is part of the reason why Poland lived under nearly half a century of Soviet communist rule, where their economy was tightly controlled. This meant their development was constrained by the higher priorities of the Eastern Bloc. That is, until they finally gained genuine independence in 1989. But Poland instantly faced a major problem. All of their bases and military infrastructure was created to facilitate advancing to the west while defending against an army trying to move to the east. According to a publication titled Poland's Threat Assessment, after 1991, Poland had to do a complete about-face and flip their bases locations to face a threat from the east. This was a lot harder than simply moving your no trespassing signs. This was done while simultaneously pulling off major civil reforms to transform from a centralized communist economy
To a democratic free market one.
As a result, Poland experienced an economic resurgence. But during periods of prolonged peace and prosperity, it's easy to let down your hair and lower your guard a little. From 1995 to 2009, the Polish military size was reduced from 300,000 to a low of 121,000. Many units were disbanded, and training centers closed their doors. According to the research paper titled Defense and Industrial Policy in Poland by Marcin Turkalowski, even as Poland's economy grew, their defense manufacturing capabilities atrophied and received less funding. In 1999, Poland joined NATO and in 2004, the European Union, in an effort to solidify alliances and maintain that sovereignty. But this had the knock-on effect of purchasing tanks from foreign NATO allies, becoming dependent on them instead of their own industrial base. Poland's former Minister of Defense said, quote, "Until then, the threat from the east was underestimated. However, we soon realized that the policy of reducing the army was leading nowhere and was the wrong approach." Try as Poland might to stay out of the geopolitical circus, those monkeys kept dragging them back in. Because in 2014, the Russian invasion of Crimea seriously spooked Poland. They took two major steps in response. The first was transferring military technology from the United States and South Korea. The second was consolidating the defense industrial base from 50 separate Polish companies down to one single holding called the PGZ. Then, in 2022, Russian invasion of Ukraine saw Poland taking the step of kicking their effort to get rid of their old Soviet-era equipment into high gear. 260 tanks were gifted to Ukraine, which is almost all their Soviet-era T-series based tanks. It's like the old Polish saying goes, with the hag off the carriage, it's easier on the horses.
That was considered politically correct in the 1800s.
Because now they could focus on replacing old stockpiles with brand new arsenal. I think one word can sum up all of Poland's national procurement strategy since then: mass. It's the piece of the puzzle that Poland feels they can bring to the table: sheer manpower. This makes sense as their population is currently in the top 10 in Europe at an estimated 41 million people and a land mass of over 320,000 square kilometers. That's a lot of ground to cover down on and protect, because the linchpin of Poland's whole defense strategy revolves around acquiring 1,300 new main battle tanks. But what will these tanks be protecting? Take a look at Poland's border. It's every military planner's worst nightmare to defend. Poland shares a 530 some odd kilometer border with Ukraine.
According to open source numbers, there are 8 ports of ground entry between Poland and Ukraine and an additional 4 railways.
These are where much of Western military aid transits through. It's what we would call the main high-speed avenues of approach that would need to be defended.
Okay.
It would also become a two-way range possibly in the future. Poland decided they need a contingency plan in case this border ever becomes hostile, occupied by Russia. It gets worse, because they also share a continuous 400-kilometer border with Belarus, who's a member of the Moscow-led Collective Security Treaty Organization.
Now, there are 11 ports of entry connecting Poland to Belarus, according to publicly available data. Just right there, that's a total of roughly 19 different avenues of approach for tanks to come through in a worst-case scenario. Polish forces need to split up and disperse throughout this territory to defend it.
I can personally relate to this. I also have trouble setting up personal boundaries. However, Poland has an ace up their sleeve. In 2017, their military stood up the Territorial Defense Forces, which is a 37,000 strong reserve unit with the ability to call up an additional 100,000 volunteers if needed. The Territorial Defense Forces' main mission is to guard against hybrid threats from Belarus in the east. The current conventional threat from Belarus is considered to be a medium threat, with only 2,000 Russian forces stationed there and 50,000 active-duty Belarus professional soldiers. We've seen how Belarus got creative in the past by sending thousands of immigrants to Poland's border to pressure them politically. However, a larger concern here is that in March 2024, Russian tactical nuclear weapons were moved to Belarus. This created a pressing need for air defense that we're going to get into. So there are 4 main highways to cover, but the problem is, it's not like those serve as perfect choke points. When we look closer, when we zoom in on the tactical picture, we can see how Poland's geography plays a major factor. Their land is made up largely of flat plains and farms that are dotted with small forests, usually a few kilometers wide. This makes the borders more porous. Less cover and less concealment. It's a major reason why Poland requires this mass and quantity, because of the lack of natural choke points. It will all work out somehow. Polish military authorities are all too aware of this problem throughout history. And so the strategy they developed is to deploy 3 Polish army divisions equipped with the cutting-edge gear to 3 separate areas of operation. The first is the newly created 18th Mechanized Polish Division that was stood up in 2018. Their mission is to focus on defending the southeastern border.
The 18th Mechanized Division is already pre-positioned in the southeast, instead of having to spend valuable weeks to deploy. Here's a map of some of Poland's major rail networks that can help facilitate logistics. The railway through the city of Rzeszów, just 60 kilometers from the border, has become a major hub for Western aid shipments into Ukraine and the target of Russian spy rings. This is why it's important to have stockpiles and infrastructure here ahead of time as a contingency plan.
Next up is the 16th Mechanized Division that's focused on protecting the northeastern borders, especially here.
This is called the infamous Salki Gap, the thigh gap of Europe. The Salki Gap is a narrow strip of land about 65 kilometers wide between Belarus and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad.
This is where Poland shares a direct border with Russia. The border is about 230 kilometers long, with 4 major roadways connecting it to Poland. Before the war in Ukraine, estimates placed a sizable 30,000 Russian troops and hundreds of tanks stationed there, but they have since been diverted to the front lines in Ukraine. This has left only 6,000 Russian troops behind. Assuming no changes, some Polish tanks will be tied up in the north by this small force. From the operational perspective, though, control over this corridor was essential for NATO to reinforce their Baltic allies in case of a conflict. Prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this location looked like it was a major vulnerability to NATO planners because of the potential for Russian forces to skirt across to Belarus, linking up and effectively cutting off the Baltic states from resupply. However, that calculation has now changed. According to this article by Callum Tennant of Euronews, this threat is greatly reduced today, thanks to Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Tennant says, quote, "To put it simply, with NATO members bordering most of the Baltic Sea, Russia would be unable to prevent Western reinforcements arriving by sea."
If that sounds like a lot to you, I challenge that assumption, sir, because Poland resurrected the 1st Legion Division from 1944 to also deploy here.
It's the first one that's formed from scratch entirely, starting in 2022, and will consist entirely of state-of-the-art equipment. The 1st Legion Division will be the largest of them all, and its goal is to saturate or fill in the gap between the 18th and 16th Divisions. So that's why maintaining large tank formations is strategically important for Poland. The unique requirement of their geography makes it necessary. But the vast majority of Poland's new tanks will come from the 820 South Korean K2s that they plan on producing domestically in their own country. Make haste, slowly. Part of the problem with any defense procurement is just how long it takes. We have to adjust our frame of mind from thinking about threats that we face tomorrow to thinking about threats we might face 10, 15 years from now. Much of Poland's new equipment will not be fully acquired until 2030 or 2035, even according to their own estimates. The world could look very differently by then. For all we know, Taylor Swift might not even be the top female artist anymore. It'll take Poland until 2026 just to start manufacturing those K2 tanks. Warsaw has already ordered 366 American Abrams tanks for over $4 billion. That amount will include everything, though, from spare parts and training to brand new repair headquarters. Take a look at the Polish city of Poznan in the western part of the country, safely tucked away. It's where the Abrams Training Academy and new Abrams repair plant is located. This is actually a lesson learned by Poland in the early 2000s when they first purchased foreign tanks from Germany, and they quickly found themselves with no way to fix them. This center will also fix damaged Abrams tanks coming out of Ukraine. So far, 5 of them have been knocked out there. Poland will receive 250 of the newest M1A2 SEP version 3, which will include all those modern bells and whistles like thicker armor on the top to counter the newest threat of kamikaze drones. This is why, in the meantime, they've ordered rapid deployment of 180 South Korean K2s as a stopgap. So far, they've received 46 K2s and 69 of the Abrams ordered. But in case things get spicy quicker than that, there's another idea the Polish government has been kicking around since 2023. They might request stationing NATO nuclear weapons on their own soil. On April 30th, 2024, very recently, Poland's President Duda met with Prime Minister Tusk to talk about whether or not they should try to enter something called the Nuclear Sharing Program. What's that? It's a component of NATO's nuclear deterrence policy that provides nuclear weapons to member states that don't possess their own. It's like lending your friend a book to build trust with them. It's exactly like that analogy. Just since 2009 alone, Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey have all played host to nuclear weapons that were given to them through this sharing program. Sharing is caring, even when it comes to nukes. This is now being openly debated in Poland. Poland believes it's necessary in response to Belarus receiving nuclear weapons under a similar program with Russia. Check out our new merch if you have a chance. It's not shoot to kill, it's shoot to chill. Another challenge Poland's armed forces face is how to move thousands of infantry around such a large country. This requires infantry fighting vehicles. That's why Poland ordered 1,400 domestically built IFV Borsuk vehicles to replace their 1,200 Soviet-era BMPs. However, only 5 prototypes have been built so far, and their delivery isn't planned to be finished until 2035, which
What?
leaves them stuck with those BMPs in the meantime. And this adds to the long list of different types of vehicles that they need to maintain, which leads to one of the next raised concerns about having so many different types of vehicles is going to increase the cost of logistics. But considering how large the fleets of all these vehicles are, the economies of scale should help mitigate that problem. Whereas some other countries in Europe have been criticized for not investing in quantity, we'll see that is really not something you could say to Poland with a straight face.
Each country in NATO is focused on acquiring different types of weapon systems. Some are focusing on quantity, while others focus on nuclear weapons. Poland actually talks about this being one of their 4 pillars of defense, saying, quote, Poland takes into account the context of their membership in NATO. The basic factor shaping Poland's security is its strong embedding in the European structures and the development of bilateral and regional cooperation with key partners.
Every stick has 2 ends. The question of whether or not Russia would invade Poland again in the future is well beyond my capabilities of answering as just a lower level ground. I can look at the statements made by both parties. On the one hand, Putin has addressed this question and said publicly that he has no intention of invading Poland, pinky promise. But Russia also stated they had no plans of invading Ukraine in January 2022. And so, on the other hand, Poland's President Duda said, quote, we're a nation who was enslaved by Russia several times. If Russia wins the war in Ukraine, he will attack one more time. He will attack other states. So the Polish government claims they view the threat from Russia seriously. There are 2 sides to every story. But something I don't think is discussed often enough is how there are many forms of warfare that can occur short of that threshold of a full-blown invasion of Poland.
Our Task and Purpose Discord channel clued me in on the news that this espionage was already happening. Poland's internal security service has uncovered multiple Russian spy rings that were able to successfully track weapons shipments from Poland into Ukraine and then strike them with long-range fires.
They highlighted this in their very own 2020 National Defense Strategy document that is many pages that I read so you don't have to. It says, quote, the Russian Federation carries out activities below the threshold of war, of hybrid nature, using non-military means, including cyber attacks, disinformation, to destabilize the structures of Western states and societies, to create divisions among allies. If Russian forces were to annex all of Ukraine, there would undoubtedly be gray zone warfare, including flying enemy fighter jets through their airspace, infiltrations, possibly fomenting revolutions in their territory, or large-scale military exercises on their borders. There could be drone and missile strikes within their borders that still would not amount to a full-scale invasion.
These are some of the same motivations the Russian government has given for why they don't want Ukraine to be friendly to Europe and the West.
How you make your bed will determine how well you sleep. Simply having a massive amount of tanks isn't enough for Poland. We've learned tanks are vulnerable without air defense systems. This is why Poland struck a deal worth up to $15 billion with the United States for 48 of their Patriot missile launcher stations and more than 650 interceptor missiles to go with it. The Patriot has about 150 kilometers max range and can intercept ballistic missiles, aircraft, and drones. In theory, this could be enough coverage to protect Poland's entire border, their major cities, and their defense industrial base in some cases. A separate $5 billion agreement with the United Kingdom for 100 of their Nauru air defense systems and 1,000 missiles is meant to ensure the protection of their ground forces. All of these air defense systems are planned to be synchronized under their integrated battle command system. Europe is attempting to build an integrated missile defense shield like the Iron Dome, and Poland is going to be at the center of it. Poland's former Minister of Defense said, quote, we are drawing conclusions from the war that is taking place in Ukraine. We know the methods used by the Russians, and we have no doubt that anti-aircraft and anti-missile defenses are an important element of security. Another necessary protection for
I am gonna pause this right here, just real quick, guys. I just want to see now. This is my opinion, and I Poland is not preparing for any war. All right, Poland is undertaking the significant military enhancement, you know, to deter potential conflicts, guys. Now, I would say, particularly in light of increased tensions, with Russia and Belarus, you know, just following with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So I don't know, man. I don't know. Poland is just creating a defense strategy. You know. All right, so let's continue watching.
Tanks and air defense assets to maneuver freely is artillery protection. $450 million will go to ramping up Poland's artillery shell production.
I'll do the same.
Currently, they produce about 30,000 artillery shells per
spending,
year,
man.
which is about as much as the US produces in 1 month. Their goal, according to Defense 24, is to reach 200,000 per year by 2029. The reason for this increase isn't just to send them to Ukraine. They'll be needed to feed their increased artillery hardware. Poland's investing $2 billion on 672 South Korean K9 howitzers, many of which will be produced domestically, and 500 of the American-made HIMARS launchers, and 288 of the South Korean Chunmoo rocket artillery. These are long-range strike capability out to 300 kilometers, and they plan to acquire over 1,000 munitions for them at a combined cost of $12 billion.
I think this quote from Poland's former defense minister helps us understand their perspective.
Let us assume the rulers of the Kremlin decided to rebuild the Russian Empire. Our goal is to create a situation in which a strong Polish army will actually deter the aggressor, and one of the most important components of this army will be rocket artillery, end quote. According to this line of thinking, Poland has to assume the worst-case scenario. There's a concept from Sun Tzu that I think helps explain this line of thinking. It's called being on death ground. Death ground is when your opponent puts your back up against the wall and forces you to prepare for a fight. However, we've learned that your artillery, air defenses, and tanks, they're all sitting ducks if you can't maintain some level of air superiority or at least contested airspace. This is why Poland's acquiring 32 F-35A Lightning II jets from the United States as part of a $4.6 billion deal. This will complement their 48 F-16s and about 28 MiG-29s, and they're also purchasing 48 F-50 fighters for a total of over 150 fighter aircraft. And an additional $12 billion will be spent on acquiring 96 of the AH-64 Apache attack helicopters. Poland's modernization will not be without its fair share of challenges, though. According to Robert Schulda's defense policy paper, Poland's demographic forecasts show a decreasing population, which could make doubling their forces tough to pull off. Currently, the Polish army has roughly 70,000 active personnel, according to open source numbers, which means reaching 140,000 could be difficult, but it's the goal they're striving for. There is no loss without some gain. Opinion Research Center survey from 2022 says that 79% of Poles believe that the war in Ukraine threatens the security of the country. Is it okay to say Poles? That sounds, can you say Jew, Pole? They're okay both, I think. I can't speak for the people, but these changes appear to be widely popular in Poland. Beyond the clear national security factors that we covered, it might have to do with the fact that Poland's government also increased social program spending at the same time, increasing pay for teachers by 30%, for example, which means you're getting both guns and butter for dinner tonight. Unlike in France, where pensions may be cut, Poland's actually increasing pension payments. However, one of the main challenges for this modernization will be if Poland is able to secure long-term financing for the project. The budget deficit in 2024 will be 5% of GDP, which is higher than expected. Under the agreements, a second loan from South Korean financial institutions will need to be provided to Poland, which has made South Korean lawmakers have to increase their lending limits to stay on schedule. I think when you look at the new equipment Poland is acquiring, it tells us an interesting story. Could be designed to be more than just a defense. Personally, I believe from Poland's point of view, they need adversaries to look at their army and view them as having the capability to go on the offensive if they were pressured into it. It's not enough to just have a defensive capability to deter war. You also need your enemy to believe that your ability to take the fight to them to make them think twice about messing with you. It's true, Russian forces have lost 2,000 tanks in their war, but they remain a credible threat because they've thrown themselves into a wartime economy. Their forces are reported to be 15% bigger than in 2022. They've spent 40% of their entire budget on military defense last year. Poland wouldn't be going it alone, though. They'd be reinforced by US and NATO allied forces in the event of a conflict. Poland's armed forces remains one of the most important factors on NATO's eastern flank. Alliances come and go, friendships change, but something that has preserved since the 10th century is Poland. And this new defense modernization effort shows they plan to be around for many centuries to come.
If you want to learn and talk with a community of people interested in subjects like this,
Join me on the Task and Purpose Discord channel. I'll be in there all day Friday. And be sure to check out the Warzone's new YouTube channel. They just launched the series, and their first video is about the F-16N, the Navy's F-16.
All right, I have to say, very interesting. All right, Chris, thank you very much on this information. Task and purpose. Yes, that was amazing. I'm so glad I dived into that one. You know, now I have to say these measures um, just reflects Poland's commitment to a defense posture, guys, intended to deter potential aggressors. You know, so through and the way they're going to be doing that is through strength and preparedness, you know, maintaining regional stability and preventing the outbreak of war. Yes. So, guys, this is where I come to the end, and thank you very much for joining me on this reaction on the channel today. I will see you guys back on another reaction. So sit back, relax to see what I have coming up next, because I have some amazing content coming up for you. So stick around for that. All right, I'm going to leave the original link down in my description right now, guys. My channel, I have entered the partnership program, so you could go in there and just click any of my links. They are all clickable. All right, thank you very much for that, guys, the love and the support. So I'll be seeing you back. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends and your families. Till next time, guys, peace out. I love y'all.